Now that Brady Cook has set the Missouri quarterback position, well, it's time to move on to other position battles, including the running back spot, where so far there isn't a lot of clarity. So let's sift through it all coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball 5 days a week. Thanks for making this your first listen and telling a friend. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. Just send them to lockedonmizzou.com. But I tell you what, we're getting awful close to football, aren't we? How exciting is that? Just over 2 weeks away, just 16 days away. In fact, so for the most part, really the first string of this Missouri football roster is coming into focus. There really aren't a ton of position battles right now, especially with quarterback 1 being set. We know Brady Cook's at least going to be taking the first snap, right? So not a lot of drama there so far. I suspect he's going to keep that job for the entire season, but we shall see. Again, week 1, we know what's up. But when it comes to the running back position, well, a lot to be decided, it would seem, so far. I have to say, I'm starting to soften a little bit on my stance that I think Eli Drinkwitz will pick a running back and go with it for the most part, take a bell cow running back, if you will. The more I start to read the tea leaves a little bit, though, I don't know if that's going to be the case, at least in week 1. Perhaps by midseason, Drinkwitz will have settled on a clear number 1 running back. But as of right now, the number 1 guy maybe seemed like it was going to be Nathaniel Peat, the former Rockbridge product, the former Stanford player transferred from the Cardinal just this past offseason. Well, he's been limited so far in practice, as has the true freshman sensation Tavoris Jones from Texas. So far, nobody completely has taken that job and ran with it yet. Excuse the pun. Now, we have heard that Eli Drinkwitz does like what he's heard from Cody Schrader, a big-time talent, a kid who transferred from, what was it? I keep forgetting if it was Truman State. I believe it was Truman State. Hold on. Let me look it up really quickly here while we're on the air. And yes, Truman State. I was correct. Okay, glad. No correction needed at this point. But a kid who's obviously shown that he can produce at a lower level. Can he produce at a higher level? Well, again, if you just watch the spring game, you might think so. Perhaps Missouri fans have been fooled by walk-on running backs in the spring game before. Mike Cox, notably in the 2021 spring game, had us thinking that maybe there'd be a goal line sort of role for him. But I think more than likely you're looking at the previously mentioned Nathaniel Peat, Tavoris Jones, Cody Schrader, and also Eli Young, the former Barry Odom recruit, I do believe, Knoxville product. Had some pretty good moments in the Armed Forces Bowl this past season, but if you really want to break it down, it just doesn't seem like the staff is completely in love with Elijah Young for whatever reason. Maybe I'm misreading that, but at this point, it doesn't seem like he's necessarily going to be given the job to run with it either. I do think there's a strong possibility that whoever gets this job will have to basically earn it on the field. I don't know that in week 1 we're going to have one guy who's the clear one. One more player I didn't mention, B.J. Harris, a guy I believe his second year with the Tigers. I think he's got a chance to play as well. So you've got 5 different running backs that I just mentioned there. Some other guys could possibly be involved as well. It just doesn't seem like, again, sorry to repeat myself, what I'm trying to say here is even though this could mean a running back by committee, maybe there will be one guy who emerges, I'm not married to either strategy. I really am not, because based on what I've seen from Drinkwitz so far, I assume the Missouri rushing attack is going to be pretty good, regardless of who gets the lion's share, or the Tigers' share, if you will, of the running back carries. My big concern, though, just among those 5 guys that I just named, I don't see who the obvious candidate is to replace Tyler Beatty's production in the passing game. Who among those guys, who is the guy who is the screen man like Tyler Beatty was last season? The guy who you can actually throw the ball down the sidelines to out of the backfield on a wheel route, or out of the backfield on an angle route over the middle of the field as well. A whole bunch of different ways that you could use Tyler Beatty, a reason why he was such a versatile weapon for the Tigers, and frankly a reason why I thought he was going to go a little bit higher than the 6th round of the NFL draft. But regardless, from the Tigers' perspective, it's totally unclear, at least to me at this time, who is going to take that job. Maybe Nathaniel Pete has more passing ability than I'm aware of. He certainly probably has the most experience on the roster outside of maybe Cody Schrader. But again, Cody Schrader, not only new to Division I football, SEC football as well, obviously. So a lot of questions there that, again, I don't think are going to be answered until we actually get into real game action. And coming up, let's get into a few other positions, at least on the first string, that are not settled on the Missouri roster as of now. But first, I do want to tell you about one of our longest and finest sponsors. That is BetOnline.net, your place for the fastest and easiest way to check in on everything gambling. Find all your favorite sports, whether it's college football and basketball. Maybe you're more of a pro basketball and football guy. Of course, Major League Baseball every single day. You got esports, you got golf, you got the NHL, you got the combat sports. You've got it all, quite frankly, at betonline.net, including that very tasty over 5.5 bet on the Missouri Tigers. You get plus 115. Are they trying to sucker us? Yes, they are. But you know what? I think we're going to get one over at my friends at betonline.net this year. Don't bet any more than 10 or 20 bucks, though. Come on now. Let's be responsible out there. But regardless of what you're into, once again, head to betonline.net today, where the game starts. Punter is a position that Eli Drinkwitz has mentioned several times here in the preseason as a real position battle for sure. Sean Ketting, one of Missouri's kickoff specialists and rather excellent kickoff specialist, by the way, the last couple seasons. One of the guys trying to take that battle. My goodness, if Ketting could show any type of ability to be close to an NFL punter with that leg, man, maybe he could actually do both things at the next level or in Canadian football, something like that. So again, an interesting thing to follow there if you're a Sean Ketting fan. No question about that, but obviously more glamour positions are more interesting, right? Especially on offense. I think slot wide receiver is something to really watch. Now, in terms of who starts in the slot, that part isn't so interesting to me. If it's Barrett Bannister, if it's Dominic Lovett, if it's Mookie Cooper, I don't think it's going to be Mookie Cooper. More likely one of those first two that I just named. But actually how those three guys in particular are used in that position, how the snaps break out, I would think Mookie Cooper will once again probably be a jet sweep option for sure, but I'd certainly like to see his usage increase a lot. I think he's a guy who's an absolute weapon, a potential weapon without question. And at the very least, I'd like to see early in the season against Louisiana Tech what he looks like, because like I said, he was banged up all last season quite clearly. Drinkwitz even questioned his own usage of Mookie Cooper last year, maybe not letting him recover quickly enough. Well, maybe Cooper can tap into that rather large pool of talent that he has and have it come all together this year. Let's see his route tree expand a little bit. More than just a gadget player, let's see him get down the field, at the very least on some slot fades, some posts from that position, something like that. It can't just be all bubble screens and jet sweeps. But really probably more interesting to me, of course, you've got the old stalwart Barrett Bannister, about as reliable as they come, especially in a 3rd and 5 type situation. Well, also, you need some explosion, too, in this offense. And Dominic Lovett, from that slot position, I think he'll be able to provide it, especially with some danger on the outside, especially in the form of Luther Burden. Now, again, to me, how those guys are all used is going to be very interesting. And it also sort of dovetails with another position, the tight end position. Is this the year that Ryan Horstkamp, the true sophomore, I guess, well, that's not correct. Let me correct that. He's still a redshirt freshman despite playing in 2 or 3 ball games last season. So the redshirt freshman, Ryan Horstkamp, is this the year he takes over at tight end? Is it the Stevens kid, the Buffalo transfer? Who's it going to be? Or again, is it maybe 4 wide receivers occasionally on the field more often than it is that extra tight end? I'm wondering about that because the last couple seasons, again, I'm sort of leaning on my predictions of what this Missouri offense looks like based on Drinkwitz's trends so far. And a big trend is he likes to use those tight ends more in the rushing game than in the passing game, especially as an H-back, what is at times a default fullback type position. Now, part of that could be the skill set of one Daniel Parker Jr., who has now taken his blocking talents to Norman, Oklahoma, and playing for the Sooners. That could definitely be part of it, playing to your personnel. But at the same time, I think Horstkamp is shown to be a capable blocker so far in his young career as well. And for as much as I've compared occasionally Eli Drinkwitz to Kyle Shanahan, just especially how they like to style their running games, in my opinion, well, if you play fantasy football, you know that for as good of a pass receiver as George Kittle is at times, his usage with the 49ers, there's so much run blocking there and pass protection occasionally too, that actually hurts his fantasy value. So what does this mean if you're a Missouri fan? Well, I just still wouldn't expect to see a ton of passing game production out of the tight ends this season outside of the occasional trick play, for lack of a better word. Now, really, that's kind of it as far as first string position goes. We mentioned running back. We mentioned punter. Those are the big ones, quite honestly. It seems like so far, even on the defensive side of the ball, we kind of have a pretty good idea of who's going to be starting in week 1. At least we think we do. Now, maybe on the interior defensive tackle, there could be some shakeups there. The good news is a big reason for this certainty so far is the lack of injuries in fall camp for the Tigers. So obviously that's great news. That may be the biggest thing you can actually look for in terms of fall camp is, hey, are the guys healthy? They are? Okay, fantastic. Well, everything else though, once you get past the first string, boy, especially on that defensive line, it's all up for grabs. Who actually rotates into those backup in spots, those backup interior defensive tackle spots? I'd say your guess is as good as mine at this point. Unless you're seeing a tremendous amount of practice, good luck figuring that one out. There's been several transfers, one from Auburn, one from Oregon on the interior defensive line. You've got interesting guys who are redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen, talented, ballyhooed high school recruits that could find their way moving up the roster. And frankly, if so, in a lot of cases, that would be exciting for me as a Missouri fan. So really, those will be the interesting things to watch in week 1. I'm not so sure how much the depth chart is really going to give us any actual insights here. Those things have long been a bit of a, well, let's just say not the most honest guide in the world at times. So let's actually let the real snap counts in week 1 let us tell the tale of who this coaching staff is actually excited about. And you know what? Coming up, I want to talk a little bit more about the transfer portal. Yes, we've talked a lot about the transfer portal in this particular space, but I'm starting to think, could Missouri actually benefit from the chaos, at least for this season? Well, let's talk about that after these quick messages. So for as much talk as there is, or at least corporate slogan talk, right, about how it all means more in the SEC, well, frankly, the SEC right now, not a lot of difference between it and college football nationally in terms of tiers. You've got Alabama and Georgia, and then you've got everybody else in the Southeastern Conference right now. Well, that's basically national football in a nutshell. Just throw in Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson, maybe a few other teams, and then there's basically everybody else. It's kind of a lot of not only similarity, but just parity, I guess, and good luck figuring it all out. Now, again, I'm quite certain that Alabama and Georgia, barring just basically a historic rate of injuries this season, both of them are probably going to be double-digit victories and heading toward the playoff once again. But especially with the transfer portal this offseason just kicking up yet again another notch, it would seem, well, sure, as a Missouri fan, unfortunately, we lost some guys. Most notably, Mekhi Wingo went to LSU. But you know what? Speaking of LSU, the Bayou Bengals themselves lost 16 players off their roster. Ole Miss lost 17. And Auburn, who I was talking about yesterday, a Missouri opponent in Week 4, lost 20 players to the transfer portal. Now, while obviously a lot of these teams imported good talent too, it's really hard to know if Jaden Daniels, for instance, the former Arizona State product, the quarterback, will be quite as effective under Chip Kelly's offense at LSU as he was at Arizona State. Now, perhaps he'll be more effective. I mean, Chip Kelly can definitely coach some offense, so what do I know? The point is there's just massive amounts of unknowns here, including, yes, this is year one for Chip Kelly. I keep saying Chip Kelly. Brian Kelly. My goodness. Yes, Chip Kelly, a completely different human being who is the head coach at UCLA. No, Brian Kelly, former Notre Dame coach, now, of course, at LSU. Who knows? How's that going to go in year one? I think Brian Kelly will do quite well in the long run, if I had to guess. But year one, new coaches, there can always be a little bit of weirdness there, especially with the amount of weirdness there's been at LSU the last couple seasons. Already mentioned Ole Miss, they've got a bunch of transfers. South Carolina has Spencer Rattler in the fold, also an Oklahoma tight end teammate that came with him. Who knows how all this is going to play out? We all thought Kelly Bryant was going to be better than he was in 2019. Didn't quite work out for whatever reason. I'm sure a myriad of reasons it didn't all quite work out. Well, the point is, can't we all see this happening at Auburn, where there's been incredible amounts of this offseason? There was basically a coup against Brian Harsin after his first season as a head coach. An unsuccessful coup, but a coup attempt nonetheless. Of course, here's the funny thing, by the way. Here, just a quick aside here. LSU, one reason I mentioned Jaden Daniels, well, Miles Brennan, who signed a lot of name, image, and likeness deals with the likes of Raising Cane's, among others, well, he's retiring from football, so it looks like Jaden Daniels does suddenly have the inside track to be the starter, unless there is another redshirt freshman type of player on LSU's roster who might come in and take that job. But I found it funny that some people online were reacting to Miles Brennan's retirement from football, saying, gosh darn it, he should have to give back his NIL money, and which I just found rather amusing. If you've ever been by the new Raising Cane's location here in Columbia on Providence, I think you'll probably come to the same conclusion I have, which is I think Raising Cane's can afford it. Whatever the $75K or whatever they gave Miles Brennan, I think they'll be okay. But regardless, I digress here for a moment, because the point is, I just think once you get beyond Arkansas and Alabama, sure, we can definitely favor Tennessee to be better than Missouri, Arkansas to be better than Missouri. You might even say, hey, how about LSU? Historically, obviously, that's a better team. But to me, even Kentucky with their new offensive coordinator. Mark Stoops has got a hell of a program, but it's also a program that relies, much like the previous Gary Pinkel regime did, which is on developing players and sort of continuity and all that good stuff. Well, there's a lot that's all well and good, and I think Kansas State is a model for that as well, Missouri's week 2 opponent. But it also means that your margin for error is a little bit smaller as well. So to me, Missouri has a lot of reason for hope this season. If they can just elevate their level in the passing game, if they can have a little bit more juice in terms of the quarterback being able to make stuff happen outside of the pocket with his legs and being able to scramble on occasion, especially in key third down moments, and hopefully the defense will just simply be better than it was last season. Certainly seemed to improve from an absolutely horrific level that it started off the season at, so there is reason for hope there. But to me, another reason for hope is there's a lot of turmoil and turnover in college football, and sure, Alabama and Georgia can probably deal with it just fine because not only do they not have as much turnover, but the players that they're having transfer in are often the stud player at Tennessee, like the To'o linebacker last year who transferred from Tennessee to Alabama. They basically have their pick of the litter. Meanwhile, if you're South Carolina, well, sure, Spencer Rattler is a talented guy, and your projections might look good, but the reality is there's a reason he got sat down for Caleb Williams last year. And it's not just that Caleb Williams is a really good player, it's that Spencer Rattler struggled a little bit. So how will that translate to a new conference, to a new team, and a relatively quick offseason? Well, we'll just have to see. But I think for Missouri, I actually like the notion that we have maybe a little bit more continuity on offense than some of our competitors. But with all that being said, how about some continuity? Another Locked On podcast for you. Locked On SEC, Chris Gordy and his cavalcade of experts. Lots of Locked On guests on there as well, including me once in a blue moon. I've appeared on the show before. But hey, once again, Chris Gordy, wherever you get your podcasts. So, until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.